On this episode, we'll discuss how better communication builds healthier church teams. Well, hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast, the show that is dedicated to inspiring leaders and empowering healthy churches. I'm Kendall Connor, and I'm joined by my co-host here on the Ministry Branch team, Jess Moore. How are you today, Jess?
Hi, Kendall. I'm doing great.
Yeah, I'm excited to jump into this conversation today.
That's what I was going to say. I'm really, really excited to talk about
Oh,
communication.
yeah, it's a topic that I feel like, it's like a 2-for-1 deal on on these topics today. We get to
Yeah.
talk about communication and team building, and so I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. This is so right up my alley. I love it.
For sure. Well, we have a returning guest to our show that's going to walk us through this conversation. It's going to be a good one. If our listeners on the other side of this, if you haven't connected with him before, let me tell you all about him. For more than 18 years, Phil Bowdle has served in creative ministry. Most recently, he was the creative arts pastor at West Ridge Church in Northwest Atlanta, where he led the worship, production, video, and communications team. Phil is also the author of a best-selling book that's called Rethink Communication, which has helped churches around the world to build greater clarity and purpose to the way that they communicate. Today, Phil coaches church leaders. He serves as the vice president of marketing at Slingshot Group, and I can tell you that he is passionate about helping leaders to find clarity in the chaos of ministry and equip churches to put Jesus on display. And I love the way that he says that. Jess, are you excited to jump into this today?
I'm so excited. This is going to be great.
We get to talk all about how that better communication really can help to build those healthier church teams. So look, before we jump in, I want to encourage all of you listeners out there to hit that follow button. We want to make sure you're subscribed wherever you're enjoying our show. We want to make sure that you stay in the loop as we continue to release conversations like this and put those valuable resources out there. Really, that's just the best way to make sure you don't miss anything. So be sure to subscribe. All right, without further ado, let's welcome Phil to the show. How are you, man?
Kendall, great to be here with you again. Jessica, good to be here with you. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, this
I'm
is going
really
to be
looking
fun.
forward to this too. Yeah, well, I think the last time that we had you on the show, Jess wasn't on here with us. I think you might have been traveling or something that day. So this is good that we get to have the three of us on here to talk today.
Yeah. I
No
listened to
doubt.
the episode and I can tell that we're going to have lots of good conversation and laughs. Super excited.
Well, Phil, the last time that we had you on here, we asked this, and you know that we ask all of our guests when they come on, what's something that doesn't make that public bio that maybe all your family and friends would know about you?
Well, last time we covered the essentials, Dumb and Dumber being my favorite movie. I'm glad we could start the conversation with that. So it was really good to get that out there.
That was a great answer.
Yeah. So still a coffee snob, still love that movie. Still, those things are still the same. So if you listen back to the old episode, I'll still claim everything there. I think the other side I would just say is I have a really good knack at telling God, I'll never do this, and God saying, watch this. So that's been a lot of my life. God, I'll never be in ministry. And then here was, I'll never be a pastor though. I promise. I'll just do this. And then no. And then most recently, I thought never would I move back to Kentucky where I went to school, went to college and everything. And 2 years ago, we moved back here and built a house here and everything. So God's plans are definitely better than mine, I will say. But I have to be mindful and careful of not telling God no. So he just says, watch this whenever I do that. So that's a knack of mine.
It makes me wonder how many church leaders are on the other side of this podcast who are just nodding in agreement on this, like with the same story of, I said that I would never be in ministry or all these things. And look at
honestly,
how
Kendall
God
is probably
does, right?
most that I talk to that are like, it's not really typically the thing that you grow up saying, one day I'm going to be doing, this. So here we are.
I love it.
Well, along kind of that long line of thinking, tell us a little bit about your story. How did you first become passionate about the church, about communications, and all of these different things that you've done in ministry?
Yeah, I mean, I could take this a number of different ways, but I'll just say, I've being a pastor's kid, I've been around the church, my
Sure.
literally whole life, on that. And so that was part of why I didn't necessarily think that would be part of my plans. But specifically when it comes to communication, some people are really drawn to a thing like communications or music or whatever it is because they've seen something done like crazy well,
Mm,
with such excellence, such a high bar. They're like, I want to do that. And for me, it was kind of the opposite. Like it was seeing things
Mm,
done sometimes poorly or have poor communication, having miscommunication, and seeing the cost of it. Poor communication doesn't just impact someone; it impacts everyone.
yeah.
And I
wow.
think for me, it was passionate about it because it was really a burden of seeing, like this. If this is done poorly, it impacts everybody. But if it can be done right, it can be the fuel behind so many amazing things,
Wow.
behind the mission of what God's doing through our church. So for me, it was like just a burden of feeling like, what would this even look like if there was a new path, a better way that we as churches could advocate for the people we're trying to reach and serve them well through a ministry like communication. So I think for me, that's what fired me up is figuring out, learning the hard way a lot early on, but ultimately just trying to find ways like you shared my bio there, just to put Jesus on display on it. Cause it's for me, it's not about like cool metrics and analytics and
Yeah.
social media posts and all those things. Those are fun, but it's really a into the means of we want to put Jesus on display with what we communicate, and what better calling and opportunity that we have to be able to invite people into that through good communication and through teams that can be aligned on that mission.
That's so good. It's such a critical cornerstone piece, right? Like if you
Yes.
don't communicate well, people cannot find your church. People cannot engage in your mission. Like it feels really basic. It's one of those, it's simple, it's hard,
Yeah.
not easy. It's
Yeah.
simple, but it's not easy, you know? Like you have to be
Mhm.
strategic with it. But it's such a critical, like it's a duh. Like,
Mhm.
of course you need to communicate well. But what does that actually look like? What does that mean? How can you be
Yeah.
with it?
Well, and it's great that we get to kind of talk through this perspective with it today because so often church communication is just viewed about the work of promoting your events, everything
Mhm.
externally, right? Creating content, sharing announcements. But I love that you've spent a lot of time talking about that side of it, but you also have a lot of experience in talking about it internally, making sure that your
Mhm.
team, that your staff, that your
Mhm.
volunteers, that they know what's going on. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I think, like I said, everything communicates.
Mm,
Everything communicates something, whether you intend it to or not. You can't say we don't do the communication thing. Like, no, you're doing it one way or another.
right.
It may be poor, it may be amazing. But often our framework for how we think of that is what we're saying from stage, what we're
Yeah.
blasting from social, what we're telling other people so that they'll get what we want them to get, and that's a part of it. But that is like really an extension of what internal communication
Yeah.
looks like and how teams
Yeah.
communicate, how teams are aligned, all that stuff. There's communication interwoven in every single one of those things. So what I've been a little bit surprised by, but not, but really encouraged by is seeing like the background in communication really means that you're involved in leadership, you're involved in clarity conversations, strategy, all of it, because
Mm,
communication is interwoven in all that. It's not an afterthought.
Right.
And so I think that's why it matters so much. And that's why I think some of the listeners listening to this that are in the trenches of communication, like that's why what you do is so important.
Mhm.
Like it's not to be overlooked. Like you're not just the Kinkos to the church. You
mm,
are you are a minister of the gospel. And sometimes in conversations of one or two or hundreds or thousands, on that. So how we communicate internally, externally, how we work as teams, how we communicate from stage, all of it matters because everything really communicates.
It's almost like
mm,
the narrative that you get to control that represents your culture as a church and your mission as a church. Like how you, I'm going back to like my college. I studied communication. That was my major, and I loved every minute of it. I loved all my classes, but it really is your tone, everything that you do internally will then resonate out publicly. So it's really important.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, and it reminds me, it was just a few episodes ago that we had Tyler Harden on the show, and he was talking about if you, as you know, if you have someone on your team that works primarily with your communications, if you can get them around the table, that leadership table, as much as you can, it's going to benefit. It's going to end up benefiting the whole church because they're going to be
Yeah.
able to help you to take that further. But really, that communications, it goes across every role. We all have to communicate in one way or another, but for those people who are serving in their churches who are dedicated to the task and the craft of communication, we're so appreciative of you. I mean, you're doing the Lord's work when you're getting these
Mhm.
things out to the people. So it
Yeah.
is very important.
Well, and honestly, we've done a disservice, honestly,
Mm,
to this area of, because I think the legacy of what communication looked like, 10 years, 20, 30 years ago looks so differently than what it is now. But
Mm,
often the way we look at it,
wow.
often other, leaders around us look at it the same way of like, yeah, you just tell, all the real work happens. You just make the announcement or you just make the
Hmm.
graphic or whatever.
Yeah.
And and that's why I think a lot of leaders are like, "Oh, I might not have a place in church communications," because they don't look at it as a leadership role. They don't
Mm,
see it as we need that person with a seat around the table. No better case study than COVID, when
mm,
all of a sudden everything communicated and you had to do it digitally in
mhm,
times and ways that a lot of churches were not equipped for. A lot of leaders
yeah.
didn't have
There's a lot of shifting things
a
around.
framework for. So all of a sudden it's like, we're putting all our eggs in the basket of this 24-year-old who just learned Photoshop, and all of a sudden, like, our ability to make Sunday happen is hinging on this person, and now they've got to step up. Like, I don't know. I just think we've got to empower this role more and equip this role more effectively and see
mhm,
it as the ministry role that it is, not the
mhm,
Kinkos that it becomes so often.
mhm. So true.
Wow. Well, I mean, we talk about healthy churches a lot. I mean, when you think about a healthy church team, what does the
Mhm.
communication between its staff members, really, what should it look like? What should it feel like in order to get all of this stuff, not only externally, but internally?
When you th What made me passionate about communication was seeing it done poorly. What
Mhm,
makes me passionate about team communication is when I see it done poorly, and it happens a
mhm,
Mhm.
lot because it feels like it's personal. Bad communication is
yeah,
personal or it's done around a preference. The best
Wow.
communication is done when it's aligned around a purpose. Like,
Yeah,
when it's
that's
aligned
that's
about a
good.
purpose, then it's not like I'm attacking the person because I don't like them or I don't get them or they they don't understand me. They don't care about this ministry as much as I do or anything like that. Or it's about a preference of, I mean, how many times have we ever heard like, "I don't like that color," or "I'll know it when I see it."
Yeah.
That's a preference communication, not a purpose communication. And so I think that's when we see it done. Like, the best teams are aligned where their filter is constantly about who are we here to serve and what is our purpose? Why are we doing this? And then
mhm,
all of a sudden it takes all that like tug of war, type of communication that happens of who's going to be right at the end of this or who's going to have to be the boss to come in and make a decision. It takes that off the table and it's more like, what does this mission require of us?
mm,
What
That's
would
good.
we what best serves our purpose here as a team, as a church, as a ministry, whatever it is. Like, that's when good, really healthy communication happens because it leaves some room for conflict.
yeah,
It leaves some room for opinion. It leaves some room for questions and all those things like that. It's
Yeah.
messier, but it's
mm,
far more beautiful than somebody in a more powerful seat on the org chart saying, "No, all right, here's the decision. Here's what we're going to do."
mm,
That happens a lot, but I don't know that that's what the most healthy teams that I'm seeing are doing. It is far more everybody at the table aligning around a purpose and communicating well to try to accomplish it.
Well, and, it just makes me think about, there are gonna be people who are listening to this episode and they may have a small church team, where it's made up of,
Mhm.
it could be as small as one staff person and a team of volunteers. And it also could be on the other side of that, a very large team, a full staff. Both sides of those, however, I would say the communication and making sure that whatever decisions are made, whatever that main purpose of your organization, whatever things that you have coming up, or maybe decisions that are going into Sunday, all of those things have to be communicated so that everyone stays on the same page. But I would almost say
Mhm.
that really the larger your team is, the more important it becomes to keep people aligned because it's so easy for them
Mhm.
to, to kind of go into their own ways and they'll fill in the blanks, right, with whatever
Yeah.
information they don't have.
Yeah, absolutely. Like y- y- most people think like bigger is going to be better. We're going to be able to have specialists and team. Like that's often like I've never talked to a staff or a team that's like that. It doesn't have 3 or 4 hires they would love to make
Yeah.
on that, and I get it, but it makes communication so much more complicated
Mm,
and everything. So yeah, the the challenge when you get more people is you get more opinions, and honestly, you have a bigger burden to be able to know who you're working and serving with,
yeah.
to actually be able to leverage the gifts of volunteers, the gifts
Mm,
of other staff members, the gifts
Yeah.
of team as a whole, the way it's intended to be. It makes it more complicated, and often it makes it slower than we're comfortable
yeah.
with. There's a
Right.
cost to it, but there's a massive benefit to it when we
Mhm.
get to
Right. For
align a lot
sure.
more people with backgrounds, different than ours to accomplish something bigger than we could ever do ourselves.
Mm,
Well, I mean, anytime that when you have multiple people working together, right, there's the opportunity for, or there's the chance or risk of conflict, right? And I know that many
Mhm.
team problems they can be labeled as personality conflicts, or, maybe it's
Yeah.
like an issue with performance. But, communication, I feel like it may actually be the root of the problem. Do you feel like you've seen that at all?
It usually is, like, when you read articles about, what is the root of most marriage problems? Communication.
yeah.
What's the
Right.
biggest issue for, teams? Communicate like, it's always one of the top,
Yeah.
Yeah.
parts because it doesn't we assume it's happening without, actually having the reality that it's happening well,
Yeah.
Mm.
on that. So it's yeah, clear it's the root of most of our problems I found. I would assume that you all seen the same.
Oh, yeah. Well, and Kendall, you briefly touched on it, but it is our human nature to fill in the gaps where we don't have clarity, right? And so,
That's right.
even with the best of intentions, a wonderful leader who is, a an incredible visionary, but maybe lacks ability to hone in on the how we're going to accomplish this, right?
Yes.
I think that's a perfect opportunity to connect with someone who is gifted in communication to bridge that gap, right? So,
Yes.
Phil, you just kind of gave us like a high level explanation of best case scenario for teams, but to really put into practice what you talked about, like this maybe use case, right? So leadership is meeting. This is kind of the general direction we're going with sermon series in the summer. Um, we know where lead pastor wants to go. We know where we're, heading even end of summer going into busy season. How are we going to get there? How are we going to get to the graphics? How
Mhm.
all of those other pieces, um, if there's not clarity around like even like a conceptually, we're going to be walking through Psalms, what do you envision that looking like?
Right.
Even asking a question like that helps fill in
Mhm.
gaps that otherwise just kinda sit there, and then you do come back around to the team and, "Wait, you totally missed. We're talking about Psalms." "Well, yes, this is what I assume Psalms looks like."
Yeah.
"Well, that's not what I was thinking." Just the more you can fill in those gaps, I think the more streamlined the process can
Mhm.
be, and you
Yeah.
mentioned having a purpose. Well, what is the purpose? Why do we even care what this graphic looks like? Well, it's because our purpose is to go and make disciples or introduce people to the real Jesus or whatever your mission is or
Right. Right.
specific to
Mhm.
that season, right? But I think yeah, and I mean we deal with this organization wide too, just on a real level. Ministry Brands has lots of employees, and so this is something we've been working on within the marketing team is to refine all of our processes. And are there, templates that we can use to fill in those gaps? that otherwise would be
Mhm.
left unanswered, and people just fill them in or make assumptions. And it just slows down the process. For us, we haven't seen a ton of conflict, thankfully, but it is a huge, it slows the process down quite a bit.
Yeah, I think maybe that's the big thing is like it does slow you down and like it just made me I'm sitting over here thinking about serving in my own church and I feel like as a staff, like one of the biggest things that I feel like could kind of help. I mean, if you're looking for an immediate like what's something that we could put into place that would help to make sure that people are communicating that they know what's going on, meetings, having regular meetings that are structured. And I know, there's the opposite side of, can have death by meeting if you got too many of them happening. But at a baseline, I would say having an all staff time weekly, if possible, where you can sync up your entire team to be able to
Agenda.
know what's going on. Have an agenda. That's exactly right. That you go through to keep everyone at a high level knowing everything, breaking it down after that into like a department level meeting, right? Like, this area of ministry may meet every other week, or maybe, but it's separate. But then also having
Mhm.
like that one-on-one time with leaders so that you can be
Yeah.
able to pour into them and keep them in the loop. I feel like those are simple ways, three simple meetings that I feel like go a really long way just to help with this. Phil, can you speak into that at all?
Yeah, like, the visual that I often think of is, like uh, a canoe with a bunch of people rowing. Or
Yeah.
but like if you've ever seen like competitive races, like it's impressive. They're a force to see when
Mhm.
everybody is aligned and working together. Most of the teams that I step in and work with, that's their goal. Like that's the picture they want and have. But the
Mhm.
reality is, most people don't know what seat they sit in, what role
Oof,
they have,
that's
and
good.
how
Wow.
their role contributes to the team's role.
Mm,
And if you had to really get them, to say, "Hey, what's your one sentence job description? What's the one thing that if I do this, this helps our mission?"
yeah.
Most would say, "I don't know. I just do what I'm told to do," or "I just try to
Yeah.
keep it rolling while those other people figure it out on that." And so, no wonder we often have conflict when we're not in alignment
Yeah.
on that.
That's it.
And that I think that is the responsibility we have as leaders, regardless of if you feel like communication is a strength or a weakness or
Mhm.
whatever. Clarity has to be part of it. You know,
100%.
good good clarity communicates really, really well. So,
Mhm.
clarity about our roles, clarity about our purpose, um, helps make everything run smoother and be more aligned
Mhm.
together. Because nobody wants to be that person rowing in the other direction in circles. That's no fun for anybody. It's frustrating, and that's what rocks a lot of people when they step into a church staff. They have this picture of what it's gonna look like to be able to work
Yeah.
at a church and in a ministry. Like, surely there isn't conflict, surely there isn't, like, tensions or things, and they step
Yeah.
into it, they're like, "What? I didn't know it was like that." So, like, there's always gonna be that when people are involved, but
Mhm.
I do think the stakes are too high for us to not be clear
Mhm.
Mm,
and focus on communicating well of everybody's role that they play and the purpose that they're aligned to. And it doesn't just happen, like it's not, I think in what you're talking about with your team, and like an agenda has to be created, a meeting has to be scheduled, like a
that's right.
purpose has to be aligned and communicate. Like all those things, they don't just happen on accident. They
Yeah.
happen with intention. And
Yes.
so I think that's the part that maybe we don't give quite enough time to, of the things that happen before the meeting, the things that happen, the clarity that happens before the communication, all that kind of stuff. Like it
That's good.
gets overlooked, and we make other people pay the cost for it, unfortunately.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, I feel like as, even with the best intentions and even, when we're all doing our best to have regular meetings and be able to get the people in the right room, get them around the table, conflict, whenever there's people together, if there's the potential for it. Why do you think that it's so common for church teams to struggle with this? And when they do, what are the things that these leaders who are listening today can do to avoid things like the tension and the frustration
Mhm.
and the conflicts that arise with these things?
Yeah. Well, what I would say is most ministry leaders that I've worked with that I've had some level of conflict with to navigate, uh, it's not it's not conflict because they don't care. It's
Mm.
conflict because they really care, because they're passionate about
Yeah.
their ministry and they want it communicated. And I think I was always very passionate about that with any team that I got to lead, is like, hey, we want that. We want them knocking on our door, fired up to tell people about their ministry. We
Mm.
want them passionate about getting the
That's
word
good.
out, because that means they care, they're invested. So let's not like be annoyed by their passion
Yeah,
for
that's
this,
good.
but let's align it with what is happening with them and with the rest of our church. Like, that's our responsibility. So uh, there's conflict because people care. But
Mm.
what's surprising is, I would say, most people, I don't know that we have a great framework for how to do that in ministry, because most times conflict feels like disagreement, and it feels like we're pushing against each other. It almost feels like sin.
Mm.
Conflict isn't sin. It can actually be fighting for the right things to make something, better. So there
Wow.
can be healthy conflict. There can be that healthy friction that actually helps you move faster and more effectively. But we just haven't had that modeled super well. It's
Mhm.
far easier to force somebody into just saying, "Hey, make the decision, boss, and we'll do it, and I'll grumble about it and talk about it in the hallway after the meeting." But like, you just do, like, that's
Right.
survival, but that's not health
Yeah.
for our team. So we don't have much of a framework, and we need to. And I think as leaders, we need to create enough room for some of that healthy friction to be able to be done, where it's not personal and it's not just about a preference, but again, it's about that purpose that we are here and aligned with on that. Because when you do that, it's not threatening. It's, if I say, "Hey, I don't get it," or "I'm not sure I understand that," that's not like, "Well, what's your deal? What's your problem?" It's like, no, I
Yeah.
bet they're bringing in voice to the very person that we're trying to reach, that might be wondering the same exact thing.
Yes.
We're losing if we don't create room for conflict kind of conversations on that. We gotta make that part of our culture.
Yeah, that yes, you hit the nail on the head right at the end there. I do think that there is always room. In fact, if there's not conflict ever at your church, then that means somebody's scared of somebody, and that's not healthy.
Yeah, they
So
don't feel free to voice their concerns or thoughts, right?
exactly,
Yeah.
and this is one of the sorry, I keep talking about I literally spent so many hours on all of this, and conflict resolution has been a class that has brought back tenfold in my life
Mm.
goodness,
Hmm.
because every relationship you're in, you're going to face conflict in some capacity. And so learning how to fight well is something that I think, and fight's a strong word, but being able to ask questions well, you don't use the always and the nevers and like little things like this
Right.
have been hugely beneficial to me in all of my relationships, and just like, hey, can you help me understand why this is the choice that we made? Even in retrospect, if you're going in and we notice something's wrong, it's not, hey, I told you it
Yeah.
was going to happen like this.
Mm.
Hmm.
I said it.
Yeah.
Instead, we can go back to that conversation and say, hey, can we sit down and look at what didn't work? And allow that
Yeah.
person to just naturally realize, like, I do remember you saying this, but there are some key things that you're right, Phil. Like those things do not come innately. Our
Wow.
nature is to be defensive, and our nature is to blame shift, right? It's hard to
Hmm.
take ownership for stuff, and it's hard to receive feedback. And so if that can become part of your culture, man, Satan's going to
Hmm.
have a lot harder time infiltrating your staff if you can do that well.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the tricky part that I find in this doesn't get happen in a staff meeting. This happens for me in conversations with the executive pastor or the
Mm,
director, the leader behind the scenes, when they're getting real about areas and conversations like this around conflict. Of, if there's not a culture like that where you can have healthy conflict,
yeah,
often it's, it's hard to it's hard to escalate and introduce that, because it feels
yeah,
like an escalation of all of it. And honestly, what that means for some people is, it's not only a threat to the peace that they're working in, it's a threat to their family. It's a threat to their
Mm.
employment. It's a threat to their job. It's a threat to the
Wow.
life that they've built and created. So all
Right.
of a sudden, it's not just a matter of, "I disagree, help me understand." It is like, is it worth me?
Yes.
raising that question for sake of now I'm on that on the bad list, or now
Yeah.
now I'm the them, in this conversation like that. That's, we got to do better.
Yeah.
We got to do better in that. But I understand it is tricky in a ministry context because it's not just work. It's not just a
Mhm.
job. It's
Right.
not just we're not just selling like widgets and softwares and things. Like
Right.
these are things that
Yeah.
are wrapped up in so many things. So I
Yeah.
get why it's complicated, but for all that, the more reason that's so essential for us to be like, hey, it's not about me.
Yep.
It's about
Mm.
we, and we got to create room to be able to fight for the right things together.
Yeah.
It's not us versus them. It's us versus the problem we're trying to solve together.
Yeah. You said the
That's
stakes are
good.
high at the end of one of your, uh, great comments. You said the stakes are too high. You just said it real quick, but that's the reality. That's the truth.
Mhm.
The stakes are too high to not be intentional about making this part of your culture.
Well, do you feel like getting this right starts with leadership? I mean, is it something that comes from up top?
Uh, the short answer, yes. But I don't like
That's
that
fair.
answer because it's a cop out for I can't do anything about it for the
Mm,
person
Mm.
that's not at the top.
Mm.
So
That's a good
it
reminder.
doesn't
Yeah,
mean you
we
get a
all get to play our part in it, I think.
yeah. Yeah, we all have an area of responsibility that God's put in our hands that we can do something about. And sometimes the best way to change culture is to change your subculture and
Mhm.
model it and learn from it and realize it's not so easy, actually. It
Yeah.
seems
Yeah.
easier when you're not in charge, but when you're in charge, sometimes it's
Yeah.
like, oh, this is a lot heavier than I realized. So, you know, yeah, we all have a responsibility to do it. And I would say even we have a responsibility to where if our convictions of trying to align ourselves and creating the kind of healthy culture that we want and aspire to, if that's not conducive with your current environment, then that introduces a new level of tension sometimes with
yeah.
usually
Yeah.
with you and the Lord of saying, okay, is this, am I sensing, are you actually calling me somewhere different? Is this a new
Mhm.
season or something like that? But it's not
Mm.
an excuse to operate in an unhealthy way that turns into a toxic, dysfunctional
Wow.
culture, not only in your work, but sometimes in yourself
Mm,
that takes
Yeah.
you off mission of what you're meant to do. So I think we all have a responsibility to own what we can own
yeah.
and pray for that we don't own, but we see and feel and are impacted by.
Mm.
So
That's
good.
good. Well, I mean, I know that, every church is different. Church teams, they often include
Mhm.
a mix of staff members, ministry leaders. They're going to have
Mhm.
volunteers, and all of them are going to look a little unique at every place, but all of them are going to have different personalities. They're all going to have different communication styles. And I'd love to hear from you. How do you feel like leadership, those at the top, can build alignment where what they're trying to do and what they're trying to communicate at the top makes it across all those different teams?
Yeah. Uh, a lot of people build teams not because of alignment, because of availability. It's
Totally.
Yeah.
like, will they show up? Will they do it? And that's great for week 1 or 2. That's really hard when your worship leader is not like your volunteer worship leader isn't aligned with the direction and
Mm,
mission of your church,
yeah.
or the small group leader isn't theologically aligned with you, like or whatever it is.
Mm,
Like
Yeah.
availability doesn't trump alignment. So I think we have a
Wow.
responsibility, especially the wider our scope, the more purposeful we have to be about alignment on purpose and mission and conviction, those
Yeah.
things, because that should be a magnet. Like that
yeah.
should be a magnet to repel the wrong things, or invite the right kind of conversations to do that, or to
Yes.
attract the right things so that we're building
Yes.
on the right thing. So I think alignment, and then the right behind alignment is just awareness of what it's like on the other side of me, with the people that
Mm,
you're leading. No two people on your team are going to be exactly the same. God's wired each and every single person that
yes.
He brings to our churches, our teams, our organizations, differently. And I think that if you have a responsibility of leadership, you have a responsibility of learning and understanding and being aware of your team, of the unique
That's
wiring
good.
of that team. And I, I got to see a lot of modeled behavior of, well, I'm the boss, you adapt to me. You learn me, you learn what I like and don't like, and then you adjust accordingly.
Yeah.
And that's just not the way that I see Jesus lead,
Mm.
in scriptures, and how I think what feels at least true to me of like, no, I think that's my job. It's not my job. It's not my kid's job to be like, oh, this is what, how dad operates. Like, no, I need to learn. Like, my 11-year-old
Wow.
son is drastically different than my 7-year-old daughter. Shame on me if I just treat them the same and
Wow.
have the same conversation the same way. No, it's my loving and caring for them is actually knowing how God's wired them, how they hear one thing differently than another. And so we've got to actually take the time to say, how do I know what I need to know about my team? Like there's no
Yeah.
excuse anymore too. There are thousands of great assessments and tools and
Yeah.
profiles. I can think to this day, like it became a challenge for me leading creative teams, especially of like, I want to be a student of every person that I get to know. And that
Mm.
means they're probably going to take more like personality assessments than they bargained for. But I'm going to know your Enneagram. I'm going to know your leading from your strengths. Like, I'm going to know those things because I know if I know that, like I had to learn the hard way. I had to learn,
Yes.
for one person having a really hard conversation on a Thursday afternoon was great because they could have time to cool off. For the other person, that was the worst thing I could do because all weekend they're going to be stewing over
Right.
feeling like relationally in conflict, feeling awful at their job or whatever. Like it's going to tank their whole weekend, and
Wow.
it's the same step but different personalities.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know for you, but like I like to move fast. I like to make decisions. I like to keep things rolling.
Yeah.
But I learned there's certain people that's like, you know what? I don't get their best ideas if I put them on the spot.
Oh,
I
man.
need to give
Mm.
them room to actually stew on it and crock pot it a little bit. And I'm going
Yeah.
to get way better buy-in and feedback if I give them 2 or 3 days to say, hey, I know we don't have 2 weeks, but I'd love to, 3 or 4 days from now, can we talk about that? I'd love to get your thoughts. I want this. I want your honest feedback because we're going to have to do this together, on that. So it may make you a little uncomfortable, but I know you need some space. Can I give you that? Like that.
Mm.
I don't know that
Good.
unless I know them on that. So I think even if it's a volunteer, goodness, like even more so, wouldn't you, if you volunteered your time and your energy,
Yes.
want the person that's stewarding that time
Yeah.
to care about you and care about, what you're contributing and try to set you up for success. So, yeah, what a great honor and responsibility that is when we get to actually steward those, the people
Yeah.
that God's placed in our shared alignment of purpose on that. It's a lot of fun.
So
To
much
me,
goodness. That
there is. Yeah.
Kendall, before you move on, that magnet analogy I will be
Mm.
using. That's so good.
Yeah. That's good.
Same thing can repel and attract if you've got it nailed down. That's so good.
Well, and I love, Phil, that you pointed out, it really pays off to take the time to know who you're leading. And I
Mm,
feel like no matter what role you're serving in, whether you're a lead pastor or you're leading a ministry team or whatever it may be in your ministry, yeah, being a good steward, as you said, of the people that God has put under your care and really learning them. And that's going to help you lead. And it ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that would be the way that God would have us lead these
mm,
people.
Yeah.
And so
mhm.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a good word today.
Well, and this may be off topic. Feel free to edit out if you like. But I I look back at I shared my time at Westridge. I do not look back at the communication and the services and the things that we did. I don't look back at like that amazing opener that we did. I don't look back at that series graphic that I, worked really hard at or we went through 4
Wow.
revisions on or what like I don't think about those things. I think about the conversations I have a decade later of the leaders they've become, of the
Mm,
Mhm.
opportunities they have now, and the moment that I got to champion or support or just encourage and lift them
yes.
up or give them opportunity. Like, I think of those relationships and those people and the environment that we got to share together to be able to see what God was gonna do and get in the middle of on that. So, it just, we can really easily get stuck in the busyness of
Yeah.
it and feel
Yeah.
like the people are a distraction from the project, and it's not. And if we
Mhm.
get to that place, it's a trap. And I
Yes.
think we gotta step out of it to make sure that we are um, serving with the same conviction that got us into ministry, that got us into these roles. Like that's nobody came into this kind of work that we are passionate about to just be like, yeah, whatever. Like it's
That's
who
right.
cares about we care about the people. That's what it's about in the first place. So
Mhm.
we need to remind ourselves more often than that.
Mhm.
I feel like there's been some such good wisdom that you brought here, Phil. I mean, coming out of it, we've learned that you should cater your communication and cater your leadership to who you are leading. And it
Mhm.
really, I think that's being wise about how you're delivering and how you're delivering those messages to these people and that communication, and also how you're stewarding that relationship. We talked about how it's important to get the right people around the right table and make sure that they have a place where they can hear what's going on. And then I love that you said that when it comes to conflict, that it's not always necessarily a bad thing, that right, like that you've kind of got to embrace it and be able to have those honest conversations and walk people through it. I feel like if you just were to take those things, what a difference it would make in building a healthy team, a healthy staff.
Mhm.
It's good stuff. I
Thank
feel
you.
like if there's a church leader who's listening today who they're just thinking, man, I want to strengthen our team. I want to build a healthier team and I want to strengthen our communication. If they're saying that today and they're just looking for a place to get started, where would you say is something that they could put into play right away?
You know, I th- w- w- thinking about that, I would say I don't know that many things in my life that I've thought about are communication related that didn't start with the audience.
Mm,
And so I think that's a thread, a little bit of what we talked about. But I'd say if you wanna grow, whatever, if in your leadership, in your communication, in your team, whatever it is, like it, if you aren't thinking about the person you're trying to reach and mindful of how that should shape what you say or don't say, how you say what you say, like all those things. Like
yeah.
if you're not starting there, you're probably going to be um, creating new issues that you could have solved.
Mhm.
And that, so I think about the person you're trying to reach. When I get to work with new churches, especially, I'm always at the I'm super visual in how kind of often God speaks to me, and I feel like every time I'm stepping into a new church, I always just say the prayer of like, God, help me to advocate for the person in the back row with their arms crossed.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
It's
because
good.
for me, it's like I know the intentions of a church and a team and leaders. Uh, m- most of the time are amazing. They're
Yeah.
incredible. They want the right things. Those teams all they may have disagreements or preferences or whatever, but they want the right thing. And often they get so distracted by all the other stuff that they're not positioning themselves to advocate for that person. They are there to actually serve and support and help them take a next step towards Jesus
Mm,
on that. So it's all so much about
yeah.
just getting so as passionate about the person you are trying to reach as you are about the message. And when those two things align, it can be crazy, crazy powerful for your team and for your mission.
That's really good. Phil, one of the big themes of our podcast is healthy churches and healthy leaders. I'd love to hear your perspective on what's one essential component of a healthy church?
Uh,
Kind of a loaded question, but yeah.
yeah. Podcast number 3 here coming up. Okay.
Yeah.
So, uh, I might have a different take on this potentially. I would say because I've had the more churches I've worked with, like a lot of, it's not an uncommon conversation for somebody to say like, "What's one of those healthy church? Tell me about a healthy church you're working with."
Yeah.
And I will just say, like, every church is a different flavor of dysfunction.
Mm,
Like I don't know there, and for a while that really frustrated me. Like, why isn't there this, like, that's the one, like, they did that, and now there's other ones that can just do what they're
yeah.
doing, and it frustrated me for a long time, honestly, because I wanted to say, "Here, here, here, here," and I could
Yeah.
point to every one of those to say they're really healthy in this area, or
Mhm.
they handle this really, really well, but they're all just different flavors of dysfunction.
Wow.
And I think that's okay, because I don't think that Jesus said that it was our job to build the healthiest church so that the mission can be accomplished. I think he said it's going to be his job to build the
Mm.
church, and the gates of hell won't prevail against it. So I think we have a role and a responsibility to say, healthy actually healthy is knowing your dysfunction and doing something about it, and
Okay,
Mhm.
striving to be as healthy as you can be. That's the healthy churches.
that's
It's
good.
Wow.
healthy is not perfection. It's not
Yeah.
it's not a new feeling better word for excellence and all that stuff. No, healthy is just
Yeah.
striving to say, like, it's the practices and the behaviors and the values we have to strive towards that, but not losing our dependence on knowing the perfecter of the ultimate healthy
Mm.
person building our church, and that's Jesus. So I think the healthy
Yeah.
churches are the ones that know they're dysfunctional and have a crazy dependence on Jesus. That's the healthy ones that I'm seeing.
Wow. What a fresh take. That's good. That's a great answer to our question. Uh, yeah, that's awesome. Well, Bill, the way that we love to end things, we like to wrap things up is with a final 5 rapid fire round of questions. Are you up for the challenge?
Ready? Bring it.
Okay, okay. I get to ask these ones. Okay, what's one book on this subject or similar that you'd recommend to church leaders?
So many of them, but there's quite a few. I would say, like, Made to Stick is a great book from a messaging standpoint that would be great to check out. A book that I actually got to be a part of, Reaching for Remarkable by Tim Foote. It speaks to the 7 key signatures of healthy, remarkable teams, in that way. Like, there's a lot about conflict, about conviction, a lot of
Mm.
things that we've talked about today that I know would be helpful for just figuring out
Yeah.
what's different from the functional teams to the remarkable ones. Like, nobody just wants to be functional. But what are the most healthy, remarkable teams doing differently? That would be a great resource for you if you need something like that.
So
That's
good. And
good.
we'll link all of these, y'all, so you can look for them in the show notes. Okay, what is the last thing you listened to on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you stream music?
Jessica, my playlist is it's quite broad, because any one day I'm listening to Moana soundtrack with my 7-year-old, and then Forrest Frank and the Black Crows with my son or whatever. But I'll tell you, to be true to the heart of your question, um, being a kid who grew up on Christian music in, like, the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yes.
I just went to do you remember the band Bleach?
Oh gosh, yes.
Wow.
Okay. Okay, so Bleach, they are doing their 30th year anniversary tour. They've been
Oh,
away for, like, 20 years. So I've been, like, going back to old throwback
Okay.
songs, including them,
Nice.
and they are still pretty killer, I will say. But they
okay.
did a show here in Lexington, Kentucky that I got to see. So that's, like, the most random. You're
That's
probably not
awesome.
jumping to Spotify necessarily to jump to that. But I will tell you, the new album that I'm wearing out is Switchfoot.
Oh,
They've been around for a long time.
yeah.
Their new album, I think it's called Awaken Now, or something like that. It is incredible.
I've
Like,
only
the
heard a
writing, all around is an
yeah,
incredible album.
yeah,
So
Alright.
yeah,
give
yeah,
that
yeah.
a
I gotta
listen.
get into that.
What a
Yeah.
reader. Yeah, I heard a couple songs, I was bawling, so, that's a good the lyrics are
Yep.
good. Okay, favorite piece of technology or software right now?
Okay. I'm just throwing curveballs the whole time. So again, this might be just a sign of me getting old. My favorite technology is actually, I don't know if you can see it. It's, like, right over there. It's a vinyl record player that I
Oh,
just got.
we have one of
I
those.
really so it's not like an old one from my grandpa from 1940s or anything like that. It's new
Yeah,
and it's nice, but
That's
I
awesome.
don't do a good job slowing down, honestly. And so I think I'm in this stage, I'm really trying to embrace the word savor. And so
Mm.
I've really enjoyed, like, slowing down and listen. I'm picking up and enjoying things that I didn't have the context for. The music's still the same, but it's
yeah.
different. So
Mm.
my
There's no
favorite
quit button.
piece of technology is old, but
Yes,
I'm
Love
enjoying it.
that.
more of that. Okay, quote or advice that stuck with you over the years?
I don't know why "Stupid Is as Stupid Does" just popped up because I watched Forrest Gump recently, so I don't know. Probably not your Instagram reel that you need, but that one popped up. But I'll say one that always sticks with me is, and probably fits our conversation today more, is the Abraham Lincoln quote of "Give me 6 hours to cut down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." That one
Mm.
has stuck to me for a long time, and I think even before I liked it as a strategy. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. But I think for me recently, it's thinking about nobody is gonna see and celebrate those 4 hours of doing something that nobody
Oof.
sees. They're
Mm,
just gonna see the output. So I think for me, that even is hitting me differently in this season of
yeah,
of doing the things that nobody sees to be more effective than things that people might see.
that's good.
It happens, differently.
Holy
So yeah,
smokes.
that quote.
So good. Okay. One thing you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders.
Yeah, with it. Thank you is the first.
Mm.
Is just if you're
Mm,
I don't know that any church leader hears that enough. But
that's good.
ministry is hard and it is a noble calling. It is, it ain't an easy one.
Mm,
But what a noble calling it is for you to be able to know it's part of your story, whether short or long. Thank you for
Mhm.
showing
yeah,
up
it's
on
good.
that. And I'd say the life verse for me is, in Psalm 37, it says, "Commit your ways to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act."
Mm.
And I think that's what I would encourage to leave you with, is in all this stuff. A lot of the things we're talking about are not easy. There's not an easy
That's right.
button for this
That's right.
stuff. But I think if we can do it, not just to be better at what we do, but to commit our ways to the Lord, I think we can see God act in mighty and powerful ways on that. So thank you, and commit your ways to the Lord, and he's gonna act.
So
Good
good.
word, Phil. Yeah, this has been awesome. I know that our listeners, they're going to want to hear more from you. They're going to want to follow you. Where can they stay connected with your work? What's the best places?
My website's philbowdle.com. If there's a way that you can, there's some resources and some ways I can serve and support you there. So if there's a way I can have your back as leaders, as churches, as teams, I would love to do that. So all my contact and all that stuff is there. So philbowdle.com. Give that a shout and would love to connect with you.
That's awesome. For all of our listeners, be sure to check out those resources. We'll drop all the links to these books recommendations, to Phil's socials and his website, all those different things. We'll put those on our show notes. So be sure to check that out. Phil, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I feel like I've pulled some
Oh,
great
thank you.
wisdom from this. We really appreciate you sharing with us.
And at the least, you're going to probably have Dumb and Dumber on your movie watch list here
I'll
before long.
probably go
So
check out
for
Bleach.
that, I can be
Yeah, that's
of
right.
help. I hope.
And some new music. Yeah, that's too
There you
funny.
go.
Thank you so much, Phil. For all of the listeners out there, if this has encouraged you, if you've been able to pull some wisdom from this the way that I have, would you consider sharing this with a friend? Maybe there's somebody in ministry that you feel like would need to hear this conversation today. They could benefit from it. Be sure to share it with them. Any way that you can help to spread the word, that is going to help us to keep equipping leaders just like you. So thank you for that. Again, hit that follow button. We want to make sure you're subscribed. Until next time, keep leading well right there in your community. And we'll see you right back here next week on Church Leadership Lab.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.